So I better give a quick little intro to who we are and what we're doing here. My name's Matt Corrall. I'm the lead UX designer here. So this company is called DNV GL. Welcome to the Bristol office. We're a renewable energy firm, so we have a lot of engineers here working on projects designing wind turbines and wind farms, solar farms, funky new things to do with wave and tidal power and things like that. And we have a software department here as well who build software for the industry. So I'm working in UX in that department. Most of our users are engineers. We're building applications that deal with a lot of data, a lot of complex concepts, things like that. And there's a bit of a mix of desktop and web stuff. We do some mobile apps, data visualization, and we deal with some sort of large multi-screen control room environments as well. So a nice bit of variety. Common themes in all of this stuff is it's about easy understanding and sort of easy mental processing of complex information. So I spend a lot of my time concerned with those kind of things. And for us, that's where UX design makes a lot of big differences in the stuff we build. So the last time I gave a talk about our work, I kind of talked about our whole process and all the different UX activities we do. And a friend of mine gave me a bit of a challenge recently. Yeah, I'm looking at you. He says, Matt, I'd be interested if you could do a talk at the other end of the spectrum. So could you give a talk about just one icon? I'm going to challenge you to talk about one icon and talk about all the sort of the nitty-gritty of the thought that went into that. Is there an interesting story in that? So I said, challenge accepted. My icon of the night is this one. This is the application icon for a product we make, which is called WindFarmer. WindFarmer is an application that people use to help them design and plan new wind farms. I won't go into a ton of detail at this point. It's a desktop application, so what you're looking at there is the kind of thing you would see in your Windows taskbar and your start menu. Now, I designed that icon a couple of years ago, and that one was kind of the catalyst. There was a whole domino effect of changes across the way we design our software. What it did was it started to define the way we depict wind farms and wind turbines in our software. Now, because of the nature of our business, that's something we have to do quite a lot. So I started here a couple of years ago, and at the time, if you took all the application icons from a lot of our products and lined them up next to each other, they look something like this. I think any designers in the room are probably getting a bit twitchy at this point. Oh, I can sort this out. Wasn't a great deal of consistency, but then there probably didn't need to be. We had different teams all over the place, kind of designing whatever they thought was right at the time. The GLGHs, that was an abbreviation of our old company name. So we used to be called GL Garad Hassan. We merged with a Norwegian firm a couple of years ago called DNV, so we're now DNV GL. And at the time, this was being used across a lot of application icons, which is very irritating if you've installed 7 of them, but you can't actually tell which one is which in your taskbar. But WindFarmer was up for a new release, and I got asked, will you knock up a new icon for this, because we can't use this anymore. That company's just stopped existing. So whilst what I was asked to do was one icon, I kind of knew that if I was going to do this properly, then I couldn't do it in isolation. It had to be designed as part of a system. So I tried to look at the products as a whole. I knew, as many of you in this room probably do know too, this is kind of the first touch point for a lot of customers. So this is the first thing people interact with. This is, in a way, starting to set preconceptions of how the product's used before they've even looked at it. Bless you. This is pretty important, I was thinking. So I started looking at all of our products. I was trying to explore some different graphic styles and how we might do things. I was interested in making things seem a bit more professional and consistent. But I was also interested in saying, could I make these icons a bit more descriptive? Could they tell us more about what the product does before you click on it? And then a bombshell dropped. I got this landed on my desk one day. Yeah, people who work in the company are sort of giving me a bit now. Our new Norwegian colleagues have got a branding agency to look at their software, and they've come up with this sort of scheme. And the idea was that this was going to be rolled out, and we were going to adopt this too. And it wasn't bad. It was more consistent, and they've used colour to kind of group the different products together, which made sense. But there were a couple of things that really weren't working so well for us. So one with these letters, so that was the first letter of the name of the product was stuck on the icon. Most of our products start with the word wind, so there's a lot of W's lined up. Not really very informative, so we thought we might as well ditch that, because that's not helping anyone. The other thing that they've done is they've used these sort of abstract spirograph-esque graphics in the back. So this was the sort of identity graphic for that product, and they're quite nice. But we thought, well, if we're making an icon for a wind farm, you'd really expect to see a wind turbine or two on that. You know, it seems a bit of a no-brainer. So actually, we wanted to deviate a little bit from this sort of established schema, and we wanted the freedom to create, you know, slightly different icons. And we had to move fast because this was going to be rolled out soon. So whilst at this point I've still been asked to design a single icon, in effect we're kind of fighting to maintain control of our own product identities, because we felt that we were the team who were best equipped to do it. So I started exploring. I was trying to find a way to fit our icon designs into that kind of system. I was trying to figure out how much freedom we were going to need, and try to create a sort of a scheme that would keep everyone happy. And as I'm sort of sketching through the details, there were lots of interesting little things that came out. So I started drawing wind turbines in a very sort of geometric way, and found that people I was showing it to were sort of reacting to the shape. And I thought, that seems weird. And I realised that, of course, for our users, people who work in this industry, who know the shapes of these wind turbine blades intimately, that that's the kind of thing that you really notice. So if we're going to look like experts in this industry, we've got to get that right. So I went through a lot of iterations of trying to get that blade right. The other thing was this thing. So this is an application that deals with wave devices, so gadgets that float on the ocean and produce electricity too. They haven't really got an established shape yet. They're quite a new technology. So some of them look like big swimming floats, some of them look a bit like buoys. And we realised that if we made a literal representation of one of those, it wasn't really going to be recognisable, or we'd have to redraw it every 6 months, which we didn't want. So we ended up doing a sort of stylised wave thing, because we decided that for that industry, that was going to be more recognisable. So this is where we've kind of got to today. We've managed to sort of set out an identity scheme for everything. We're consistent, but the main thing is that we've sort of proved to head office that we're able to do this, and that we're best placed to come up with these identities. So for us, this is quite a success. We managed to get to a point where we're in control of it all, and we're where we want to be. Now, I said this had a bit of a domino effect, and well, we've set a precedent now with this icon, because this means wind farm. So inside our user interfaces, we need to depict wind farms and wind turbines quite a lot. So the next question was, what do we do here? Do we use this icon inside the software as well? And the answer is absolutely not, because this colour, these particular graphic details are now tied to the identity. But these two turbines depicted like this does now mean wind farm. So, you know, what effect does that have on the software? So in a lot of our applications, this is the kind of thing we're using now. It's very simple, black and white, not a great deal of detail, but there are very good reasons for that. So I'm going to just walk you through a few of the steps that led us to something that was that simple. So here's one of our applications. Here's a kind of place where we might need to depict a wind farm. We're looking at a map. This is somewhere in Thailand, I believe. This customer has a couple of wind farms on their site, so we need to depict them on a map. So in this case, the icon has to convey two things, the concept of a wind farm and the location. The problem we have is that we do quite a lot of applications with maps, and the backgrounds can vary quite a lot. So when people are designing a wind farm, they might be doing it in a very remote location, and they might have to download and import their own sort of satellite images. They might be getting whatever decent image they can of the site. And we don't really know what colour or tone that's going to be. But we need an icon that's going to stand out no matter what the user loads in. And we also let them overlay data onto those maps too. So some of these more funky coloured things are, you know, showing how wind speed varies across a bit of terrain, or how the temperature of the air varies. So we've got this whole spectrum of possible map colours. And the reason we ended up with something so black and white was that it was always going to give contrast no matter what sort of background we ended up with. So that sorted out our colours. Now the other place that icon might get used is in other panels. So in this kind of case, we have this is another product of ours. We have a tree navigation control on the left. In this case, we've got users who are scrolling through a great big list, and they might be responsible for keeping an eye on hundreds of wind farms and solar farms. And they've got this great big list to scroll through. And we've got these little 16-pixel icons. And the key thing here is to be able to differentiate between the wind farms and the solar farms and the other gadgets in your list. And we have some people who are sitting all day using this product. And so the speed at which they can distinguish between them and find the farm they want actually has a real knock-on effect on their working day and their efficiency overall. So the reason we've ended up with something very graphically simple is so that the silhouettes are easy to distinguish between when they're used in that kind of context. But if you switch to your map, you still recognize the same sort of icon. So in this case, we're using graphic design to begin improving the performance of the icon, and we can actually start measuring the difference this makes to people's working day. So that's all good. We know what we're doing with wind farms now, but the dominoes don't really stop there. You know, the next obvious thing is, well, a wind turbine itself. We have software that needs to depict that. So it's kind of easy leap to make from one to the other. The kind of scenario where that happens is we have these sort of control room environments. So we have people in our company working in this kind of way. And they're looking at all these big monitors, and they might be keeping an eye on dozens of wind farms for a customer. And generally, these folks are sort of looking at how much electricity they're producing, how the weather's doing, and they're looking to see if there are any problems. So if a wind turbine breaks down, which you really don't want, they've got to drop everything and get on the phone, get the maintenance crew out. So the kind of UI that we designed for them might be something like this. So they're looking at a map of the site, a little webcam in the corner, and various statistics that they need. But each of those black and white icons is our turbine now. So the black and white is depicting the concept of a turbine and the location. But in this case, what they're really interested in, the real critical information, is what sort of status that turbine's in. So we've got an extra bit of information to lay on top. And in this case, that's the high priority stuff, which is why we make some with a bright colour. Nice. Or we can even have these sort of strange bat modes. So we know that bats come out at dusk and dawn. We don't want bats colliding with wind turbines. They don't want that, but it can happen because the way the blades spin could be difficult for the bats to spot. So you can actually design them so that they go into a particular mode, slow themselves down a bit so that the bats are going to spot them and there's no disasters. What I'm trying to describe is that when you design a wind turbine, you can kind of customize the software so that it works in all these different modes. And one of our applications allows people to tinker with that and experiment with different settings. So in this case, the red areas are saying if the wind blows from this kind of direction, then the turbine must switch itself into a different mode. The reason I'm showing you this is our icon becomes the center of a visualization. So this is a design tool for people to explore the setup of the wind turbine and what they might want to do with it. So there's another piece of graphic information overlaid on top. And now that we've started to set up some good design principles, well, that can extend to an entire family of icons, because there's this whole host of things that we need to put on our maps besides the wind turbines themselves. We've got these gadgets for measuring the wind, we've got bits and pieces of solar farms, we've got electrical equipment. So now that we've got these principles, we extend that to all these other icons, and we can use this consistent style across the board. And we're focusing on these distinct silhouettes so that these things are recognizable from one another. So in summary, these things, well, icons are very, very useful for us in that they can communicate very complex or very abstract concepts without such a great deal of mental effort as it would take to, say, write it out in text. So I've shown you where we came from. We had icons that said who we were, but not a lot else. I've shown you how we use the product identity for WindFarmer to take control of our own branding work, as it were. And we've ended up with more professional and more informative icons for our applications. From there, that starts to dictate how we depict elements inside our user interfaces. And I've shown you how we use graphic design to inform the performance of those, so these things are easier to spot, easier to distinguish between, etc. And finally, I've shown you how we use color and graphic overlays to put critical information on top of that, and how that varies depending on the kind of job the user's trying to do. So ultimately, I did get asked to make one icon. I mean, really, somebody said to me, can you just knock up one of those? But by designing it as part of a wider ecosystem, we've ended up with this entire library of icons, and we've used the graphics to kind of tweak the performance to effectively make a difference to the way people work. Thank you very much. That's me. I'm happy to talk more afterwards in the pub, on Twitter, however you'd like to do it. Thanks very much, everybody.